Parents will always agree that nothing's more beautiful than a child. As we grow older, we start wanting to settle down and have children. But raising children is a lot of hard work and sacrifice. Being a parent takes a lot of patience, strength, and compassion. Children need a caring parent willing to compromise a lot for them. Kenzie and Michael were about to find out just how hard it was to be parents. After meeting each other at a music concert, Michael and Kenzie just couldn't get enough of each other. They were married 5 years later and never looked back. They were the perfect couple that everyone dreamed of. After being married for 2 years, Kenzie already had a baby on the way. They would name him Josh, but it wouldn't end there. Once they had their second child, Carrie, they would be pushed to their limit. Even though Carrie and Josh were both siblings, they were very different. Josh was a quiet and well-behaved boy, while Carrie would throw tantrums and cry all of the time. But it got far worse than just that. Children go through many firsts as they grow up. Their first word, first time walking, things that are very important. Kenzie managed to tape all of Joshy's firsts, but when it came to Carrie, things were quite different. Carrie should have started walking, but it seemed he was happy to keep lying on his back. His parents were justifiably alarmed and decided to seek an expert to figure out what was going on. They went to a pediatrician. They decided to take him as soon as they could. They even found a sitter for Josh so he would be safe. But they had no idea what they would be getting into once they left with Carrie to the pediatrician. Their lives would change forever. While Kenzie took a shower before they left, she heard Michael calling out her name. She put on a towel and ran towards the direction of his voice. She managed to find her husband, who was in the corridor. They both watched as Carrie stood up and gestured at Josh. They couldn't understand, was this happening the whole time? They had no idea what was going on. Carrie was smiling at his parents before walking past them like a pro toward his brother. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. They had never seen him walk before, and now he just was with no problem. They decided to cancel the appointment with the pediatrician since their little bundle of joy was now walking without a problem. But they had no idea that sooner or later they would be rushing him to a hospital anyway. After a few weeks, nothing had really changed, other than their son walking, of course. He didn't even need anything to balance himself. He could really just walk even better than his brother. But things wouldn't always go so smoothly. One day, Carrie would pull something that would worry his parents. It would end in everyone rushing to the hospital as a result. Summer was upon them, and it would be the afternoon that the incident happened. Kenzie and Michael were enjoying some much-needed free time away from work when they heard their oldest son calling out for them. Michael kissed his wife and told him it was his turn to check things out. She smiled at her husband and leaned back against the chair. Michael was confident in his ability to help them with anything, but he was mistaken. Their oldest son, Josh, was 10 at the time. Carrie was only 2 years old at this point. Even if he could walk incredibly well, it was strange that he hadn't started talking yet. They thought about taking him to a doctor, but just like with walking, they decided to rather wait. He would do it in his own time, right? But after Michael saw what happened to his son, he would get in his car and rushed him to the hospital. Michael hurried off to see what Josh was calling about. On the other hand, Kenzie laid back to rest, trusting that her husband would handle whatever issue Josh had. She drew her sunglasses and sipped from her margarita glass. But then a sharp scream from Michael had her shooting to her feet. Michael's scream had Kenzie speeding into the house. She didn't know what was going on, only that whatever the issue was, it was massive enough to warrant such a response from her husband. Was one of her babies injured? Were both of them bleeding? Her mind raced as she dashed up the patio steps and into the house. What she'd find would make her take a shaky step back. Kenzie found Michael next to Josh. They were looking over Carrie, who sat in a pile of Kenzie's college textbooks. "Who's hurt?" Carrie asked frantically, checking Josh all over before rushing to Carrie. "No one," Michael said with a wild grin. His eyes broadened and brows furrowed. He went down on one knee and said to Carrie, "Can you show Mommy what you just showed me, bud?" "Okay, Dad," the boy said, and Kenzie's mouth fell open. "He can talk now?" she asked Michael, who shrugged disbelievingly before turning to Carrie. "Show her," he said. Carrie crossed his legs and struggled to open one of the thick books before him. He read the first sentence aloud, pronouncing words that even Kenzie had trouble articulating. But he didn't stop there. Although with a bit of straining, Carrie read the first 10 sentences of the book. He then explained what they meant in detail and even pointed at another book, saying that its title related to what he'd just read. Kenzie and Michael couldn't believe it. They rushed for their coats and scooped their sons up before rushing to the hospital. They needed to know what was happening to Carrie. Carrie's doctor ran some tests on the boy before revealing what his parents had thought as they drove to the hospital. There was a high chance they had a genius on their hands. Although the doctor couldn't be sure yet, as Carrie was still very young, he told Kenzie and Michael that the boy was already showing signs of being a child protege. The two parents took deep breaths as they drove back home. They knew their lives would never be the same again.